All right, we are live. Hi everyone, I'm really excited to interview Bakz Aman, entrepreneur, developer, and content creator. He has incredible YouTube series about multimodal AI models on his YouTube channel called Bakz Future. I would highly recommend if you're watching this video to check that out. And I'm very honored to interview him. So, Bakz, can you tell us what are some moments which got into creative AI?
Yeah. So first off, Mayur, thank you so much for having me. And I did have a chance to, of course, check out some of your videos, and I want to commend you. Your channel is shamelessly interdisciplinary. Like it's so, here's an interesting technology. How can we apply it to this field in creativity? And I like that, there's resources, there's demos, just anything that can get people excited. So, anyways, I thank you again for having me. The pleasure is also for me to be here. So the question was, what got me into AI and creativity? I suppose the earliest, a lot of it is movies, right? So I think one of the interesting things, and part of the reason I made this series, is I always believe technology follows art. So we see stuff in movies or in comics or wherever, and we try to create that as technologists. Even if the science isn't there, it's almost like we need artists to pave the road for us and tell us, here's what's possible with our existence. And we build sort of the delta. So I guess I don't want to dip into the series, but in a way, that's also what I'm trying to do, right? Is set some kind of creative technological bar and hope that people start building these kinds of software tools. But so, anyways, movies. So I guess the earliest movie is Artificial Intelligence by Steven Spielberg. That movie is super old. It's almost like a Pinocchio boy kind of story, but I think that was like the earliest exposure I had even to the concept of artificial intelligence. And then later on in high school, probably Iron Man and Jarvis. It's really interesting the era that we live in, that pretty much everyone is exposed to AI in some way, right? Like most people have used Siri, right? And
Mhm.
so I think everybody is exposed to AI in some way. And I also think everybody has been exposed to creativity in some way, right? Like I think arts and crafts, you do that in grade one, right? You're making paper mache, whatever, right? You're using construction paper, you're drawing. Even if kids don't have the tools, they're creative, right? They'll just start drawing with rocks, right? Even if
Mhm.
they don't have, crayons, right? And so, yeah, creatively for me, mainly coding, but I used to do music. I used to make videos. I used to write like poetry. And so I've always been a creative person. And that's part of the reason I started my YouTube channel as more of a creative outlet, right? I get some creativity out of programming. Programming is a lot of structure. And sometimes I like the structure, but other times, I have some videos which I'd like to think are very artistic and emotional. And so that's like my earliest intersection to all these things, and it would make sense why I made this series, keeping those things in mind.
I see. I also feel like you have such a vast like multidisciplinary background, and I can totally relate like how we see movies which have like speculative future and then like technologies inspired. Especially when I see talks about metaverses, people refer to Ready Player One. So it's an interesting like how the loop is. So I'm curious, like, do you have like your any favorite fiction, non-fiction book?
That's a good question. I guess fiction, probably Einstein's Dreams. It's this best-selling book, and essentially each chapter they slightly change the rules of physics and the universe. And so in one universe, in one chapter, time moves in a circle, and so it's a really it's a book that really makes you question some metaphysical kinds of things. It's also very short and sweet. I tend to like content that is like that. Just the like almost like an espresso shot. It's She's also very controversial, but I also do like Ayn Rand. My favorite book is The Fountainhead. It's a very controversial book. It's very heated, but I think putting aside the ideology, which I don't get too caught up in, what I like about The Fountainhead, my interpretation of that book is very simple. It's just like a uh, it's basically about a story about somebody who loves their work and they just obsess over their work and commit to their work and see it through to the end, no matter how good or bad it gets. Like at one point, the main character is broke, and I think I'm always drawn to, you know, that sort of zen like pursuit of craft. I'm really excited about that, and I like dedicating and committing yourself to something regardless of the, like, I find that inspiring regardless of the outcomes. And so Ayn Rand, philosophy aside, ideology aside, The Fountainhead is my favorite book just because it makes me work harder.
I see. And like one thing I feel about creative AI and AI in general is like if someone from artist background is starting out, there's whole another world of like so many models, so many things to learn. So it sometimes becomes overwhelming. Did you had like some of those moments, or what was the challenging part about your creative AI journey?
I think I started out creative and then ended up doing programming. And so programming for me was a little bit harder in the sense that I think programming, people who are programmers are very patient. I think, like, so for example, I remember like in middle school, I read this quote, like Edison went through like 1,000 different versions of the light bulb before he got to the light bulb, right? Meanwhile, I'm trying to connect to a database and I've already failed like 300 times connecting to the database, right? And so I'm like 1,000. These are rookie numbers, right? Nowadays, like a typical engineer, they're desensitized to failure. And I think there's something about engineering, programming, these things. The cycle time of failure is really high. Like the biggest pro engineers, they don't take this stuff personally at all. And so, anyways, like as a creative going into programming, I had to get used to failure, and then you start getting good. I had to become more logical. Certainly, web design is something that I grasp very quickly. Like front end development, I still do front end development for a living because it's a strength. It lets me combine creativity and design and programming. Backend was really hard, like when it's so abstract. And also, I almost think to some extent, like unless they're particularly interested, with kids, I don't recommend they do pure programming. I recommend something like web design where things are moving, you interact, and then you naturally want to learn backend web development because you're like, I have a design, but I wanted to do stuff. And so, like the creative part is not hard. Um, I think for in the context of this series, I've had to also unlearn a lot of my own creative upbringing. Like I've had to, the way I was taught, the way I was raised, this next era will be completely different. And so I guess the challenge that I had for this series was thinking back to my childhood and sort of speculating for people growing up over the next 2 to 10 years, which is when this series takes place, speculating how different their creative journeys will be compared to mine. And in the same way, all of this stuff is part of a longer timeline. My creative journey was completely different from somebody who grew up in the 80s, right? Before Photoshop, before Illustrator, before these things. So, anyways, yeah, I think, to be honest, like I think anyone can learn anything, like with enough desire, with enough skill, anything can be learned if you desire to go do it. And the resources are there now. So,
I see. And like there are many interesting points you mentioned, like if you're starting with web designing, playing with animations. I think that also ties back to like how curiosity can enable like enhance like learning about technology, and people like to experiment more. And like that's what we see about multimodal models, where you have some input, but the output is also very unexpected and it's surprise, and sometimes it totally outbounds the creative intuition. So can you like share what are the creative AI models you have experimented and the outcomes you found very interesting?
yes. For me, the magic moment was last summer when I got early access to GPT-3. I think there was something about GPT-3 that I felt some significant threshold has been crossed. It's been crossed to a point where we simply cannot even explain how it was able to cross it, right? So there's some breakthrough there. There's something very real there, in my opinion. And so to give people context, so what is GPT-3? So GPT-3 is what's known as a language model. So it essentially deals with text and language. You basically enter text you push a button and it basically completes the rest of the text. So it's kind of like in Gmail. Have you ever written an email before and it's sort of filling out? This is like Gmail autocomplete on steroids, right? And so for the audience, you guys are more technical, but I will like say this, like the crazy thing about GPT-3, so it's been out for like a year now. We simply don't know all the things it can do. So we know it can write poems. It can do copywriting. So if you want to check out how to, like, if you want to use GPT-3 to write some slogan or a press release or these things, go check out copy.ai. It's a website powered by GPT-3. And so it can, like, GPT-3 can do all this amazing copywriting for you and sort of already accelerate your work creatively, right? And copywriting is hard. Like as a discipline, as a creative, I could not do copywriting full time because it's so mentally challenging. Like I don't know if I could do it. But anyways, so it can write copy, it can write poems. I found it can write these amazing creative press releases. I made a video on it. There's some other nerdy stuff too. So this audience is technical. So I have a video. I found out it can tokenize text. So with 3 examples that I gave, like it was able to tokenize it. And I even got it to escape strings. So it would put the slashes in the strings too, right? And it had comparable performance, even though GPT-3 was never explicitly trained to do these things. It had comparable performance, I found, to NLTK and Spacey out of the box, right? And so the exciting about GPT-3 is it's not trained on any of these things. These are all things it learned, and it can do all these things, and we simply don't know all the things it can do. Even OpenAI doesn't know. They're the ones who made GPT-3. They're like this company. And somebody else, like I keep referencing his video, his name is Mark Ryan. He made a YouTube video. He found that GPT-3 can give directions on the New York subway system to like a 60% accuracy. And like it's obviously GPT-3 is a language model, so it's never seen an image. It's never set foot in the city of New York. It's never been on a subway, yet it's able to give to 60% accuracy. Like that's mind blowing, right? So anyways, so GPT-3 was definitely a turning point. And just so you guys understand, like GPT-3, you can't give it an image, right? It's never seen an image. Everything that it can do, it learned from text alone. And that's also why it's so crazy, right? And so to differentiate, so my series is not necessarily about GPT-3. GPT-3 is a piece of it. My series is about multimodal models. And so multimodal models, they deal with perhaps text and images, text and video, text, video, and audio, like I'm saying, multiple things, right? And so anyways, yeah, GPT-3 was, I felt it crossed some threshold technologically at a huge world level, and even creatively. Like, a lot of the insights that I share in the series are simply based on behavior we're seeing today from GPT-3. And so it's sort of applying that similar kind of, world change, life change, creative work style change to other creative disciplines as well.
I see. Those are very interesting applications, and I have seen where OpenAI released like a feature like called Codex, where it can autocomplete the code, which was quite interesting. So I'm wondering, like when you were experimenting with this creative AI models, like the first part of exploration is like quite exciting. Was there any point where your excitement got down? Okay, it can do anything now. Like I'm a bit confused where I should move on or where should I lead this?
Like where it was a little bit below what I expected.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what was your like phase of like
Okay.
working with it? Was it
So, I mean, look, this is a really interesting description, but it was almost like talking to an alien. Like that's the level that I felt like GPT-3 is so impressive and compelling. And I recommend to everyone in the audience, try to get access to GPT-3. I made a video on it. And to some extent, I don't recommend you play around, for example, with GPT-2, which is the predecessor to GPT-3. GPT-3 is so much better, like many order of magnitude better. Like you will see the value of it right away, that I don't want you to spoil your first impressions. And anyone I showed it to, whether they're technical or non-technical, they're mind blown, right? Like GPT-3 versus Siri, they're different tools, but GPT-3, in my opinion, is many order of magnitude like better than Siri. And so the first thing is I want to say is I recommend you get access and play around specifically. So GPT-3 has an engine called DaVinci. That's the most powerful one. Make sure you play around with that one. That'll give you the most like you'll see the true power of GPT-3 when you play around with DaVinci. But anyway, so it felt otherworldly. I was shocked how usable it is. So just so the people in the audience understand, I imagine a lot of you are creative. So you imagine I'm coding or something, right? You don't code to write GPT-3. There's no code involved. In fact, I've sort of speculated using GPT-3 is a lot like using a synthesizer. Like, so instead of the keys on a keyboard, you just have like a form, like a web form where you, like it's like a text box where you enter stuff, and on the right you have these toggles, right, like temperature and those things. So it's sort of like you're messing with it and playing the keys. It's like a synth, basically, right? So that is something like a child can play a synthesizer, right? Like it's so anyway. So there's no code. You don't need to train it. You don't need to set up a Python environment or anything like that. You just go on the OpenAI website, something called the playground, and you enter text and push a button. You don't even need to do the toggles on the side if you don't want to. And it responds to you, right? And so it's very usable. And on top of that, a lot of the usability is in the text itself. So in the GPT-3 world, what we call the text is we call it a prompt. And so you write a prompt. And again, a prompt sounds really fancy. Like you're probably thinking like I'm gonna have to start it with like a special kind of bracket and then write prompt and then close the bracket. Like it's not like that. It's not even like HTML. Like it's like I'm saying a GPT-3 like prompt will start with like, this is a story about a boy who nobody believed in, yet he defied all odds. Period. That's an example of a prompt. I'm saying there's nothing else that you need to do. Then you can push a button and have GPT-3 write the rest of that story, right? And so prompts can get more complex. So say you didn't like that story that much or you want it in a certain style. All you do is you copy an example, you paste that above, then you repeat the same thing. Like this is a story about, a boy who nobody believed in, and it will essentially mimic the example you gave above. Again, so you're copying, pasting text. GPT-3 has more in common with just writing. Like you're in a writer's room, it's more like that. And anyway, so just to give people context, it's literally as easy as write stuff, push button, it answers, it does stuff. And it's that alone is such a breakthrough, right? Like I can't explain it. Like this has been the dream of computer science since like 1980s. And my thing is always, how are we not more excited about this, right? Like there's all this debate whether GPT-3 was overhyped. To some extent, last summer it was. But again, these are things we've been dreaming about. And if you had told me last year, even early last year, that there'll be an AI model that could do all these things, I wouldn't have believed you, right? I would have been like, get out of here. So GPT-3 is not even affected by typos. Like you'll misspell a word and it'll know what you mean. There's other things too. So people have noticed if you put the word polite before when it's about to respond, it will just respond in a polite way. So it can like even match your like the mood that you tell it to match, and it'll be very polite in how it responds, right? And I guess the last piece is I guess the last piece is it also can deal with multiple languages. So you can like from like it does need more improvement in this area, but you can speak in Japanese and get it to write like a story for you. You can give it Japanese instructions and tell it to write it in English, and it will write it in English, right? And so altogether, the usability is so off the charts. Doesn't matter with spelling. Anyone can do this. There's no coding. There's no setup. And it doesn't matter what language you speak, right? Like it's I think I don't know what could be better than this. I don't know. Like if aliens came to this planet and we showed them GPT-3, I don't know how they would react. Right? What if they're like, we don't have this? This is incredible, right? Like, anyways, so I recommend everybody check out GPT-3. And this, I think, if you check out GPT-3 and then watch the rest of the series, it's almost like the rest of the series makes sense. Like you really piece it together. But the thing is, it's hard to get access to GPT-3. So I have a video on it, and I'm gonna do a follow-up video because it's still hard. And part of the reason they don't have it open to everybody is for safety reasons. So anyways, dabble in GPT-3. If I was in university today, I would be playing around with GPT-3. I'm out of university and I'm dabbling in GPT-3. So that's my advice.
Yeah, that there is a lot of interesting things to take away. And I remember you had like made like two videos why GPT-3 name is not good and why engineering is not the appropriate word. So it reminded me of those moments. So my next question is, what are some real life examples you saw out of coming out of GPT-3 and multimodal models? I know you mentioned a few.
Yeah. So one of the challenges is GPT-3 is for sure used in all these commercial applications, but OpenAI is a company, and so therefore their clients they don't necessarily talk about. Some of the clients they have published. One of them is called Algolia. They're a search company. They have sort of a partnership there, and you can imagine GPT-3 if you can just enter stuff in natural language. This changes search forever, right? Like GPT-3 can, read text and tell you what are the important ideas, who's the main character. Like it can answer these kinds of questions. In some sense, that's better than Google search. So, anyways, one partnership is Algolia. If you want to see GPT-3 commercialized real world, check out copy.ai. That company is making like, I don't know, like 2 million a year. Every month they make more money. It's crazy. And so its copy is being used, right? Even my series. So my series is co-written by GPT-3. And so um, there's another example. And I yeah, I recommend like so the OpenAI is also working on making GPT-3 more reliable. So one of the challenges with GPT-3 is it's non-deterministic by design. So every time you hit submit, it usually gives you a different answer. And so they're working on making it more reliable, making sure it doesn't go off topic. GPT-3 can say offensive things. So on one hand, I'm advocating check out GPT-3. On the other hand, I'm also saying like be careful with GPT-3, right? I'm saying if you're going to show this to your younger brother or something, like run that through your parents, right? Because it may say something that is offensive, right? Now, keep in mind, OpenAI has filters in place where it prevents that kind of toxicity. This is something they're working on, so the odds are low. But I'm just saying you still have to be disciplined and play smart and all the other stuff. So once those challenges are addressed, I think we'll start seeing GPT-3 everywhere. My personal view is GPT-3 will be like a utility. It'll be like energy or gas. Like it'll be something everybody just tosses in their application and their business structure. GPT-3 can, theoretically make decisions. Like you could train it to you could give it a few examples, and it's not that good at making decisions, but maybe over time it will be. Like they have a classification endpoint as well. So, anyways, many examples,
I
and
see. Hmm.
yeah, and there's also people using it to write scripts and come up with article headlines, and this it's already probably impacting you. You've probably read these something made by GPT-3. You don't even know it, right? So I think it's like a silent killer. I think it's silent and deadly, and it's everywhere, and it creeps up on you.
I see. And what do you see will be the future trend of creativity? Like if these AI models are so good, what is the job of human and how would
Yeah.
you see that?
So that's the purpose of my whole series, right? So the first video. So the series is called GPTX, DALI, and Our Multimodal Future. It's 19 videos long. It's a big series, and it's about the future of creativity. What does multimodal AI mean? And so I've sort of briefly described what multimodal AI is. I'll describe it again. So again, GPT-3 can only deal with text. It only has read text, and it will only generate text. Multimodal AI, however, like you can train it, you can give it images, you may be able to give it videos theoretically, you could give it sensory data, whatever you want. And it could technically generate like a movie. It could generate a song in theory, right? It could generate the architectural design for a building. Um, and because it was trained on all those different modalities, basically. And so that's really exciting, right? And so so this is how crazy I suspect things will be in the next 2 to 10 years, because the series is meant to take place in the future. I believe like perhaps you'll be able to write just the description of a song, and it will just generate the entire song. So just text. You'll be able to go from text to song, text to building, right? Like you'll be sitting around one day and feel like, yeah, I want a building I want a community center designed for this city, something standard looking, like not even anything crazy. And you'll get back like, maybe perhaps at least an image, perhaps even the CAD designs. I don't know, right? Um, and where multimodal AI gets crazy is if AI can generate stuff with text, you can do a lot of mixing. So, for example, you can watch the movie. Sorry, you can tell it, I want this architecture building in this. It's a community center, but I want it in the style of this famous architect, right? You can be making a song and be like, this is a song about Mickey Mouse, but I want it in the style of Tupac, right? And now you have like a Tupac kind of song, right? And at the same time, like where it goes even crazier than that. So you can generate these things, you can mix up where it gets crazier than that. I suspect multimodal AI, you'll be able to cross between the different mediums. So you'll be able to you'll be able to watch a movie like Jaws and tell it, I want you to generate an architectural building based on this movie, like only the movie, right? And it will like capture like the essence of Jaws and turn that into a building. You'll be able to like you could like technically give a song and ask it to do a product design, maybe furniture design based on that song, right? And so not only I believe will it be able to generate stuff, but you'll also be able to cross between different kinds of stuff. You'll be able to mix stuff. I believe you'll be able to texture stuff. So you could have a poem that you're writing and you could be like, I want just this one verse to be textured based on this song, based on this painting. And the creative possibilities, once that is theoretic, if it's theoretically possible, once that becomes a reality, the creative possibilities for something like that are insane, right? Like it's endless. Certainly you and I, like if you asked me to, make me a building, an architectural building based on a movie like Jaws, I cannot even imagine that, let alone draw it out instantly, right? Which AI may be able to do. And so that stuff is really exciting. And by the way, so a lot of this stuff is not only based on GPT-3, but based on a paper OpenAI published on a model they're working on called DALL-E, DALL-E. And in that paper, they had this very famous avocado chair. So they literally typed into DALL-E an image shaped like an avocado. This is today's technology. And it generated that. It generated literally an armchair in the shape of an avocado, and it blew up in the AI community. It blew up in the GPT-3 world. It's like a meme now. I encourage you to check it out. But that avocado chair, the capabilities of DALL-E, these are things you can read the paper that are possible today. And so the series extrapolates out 2 to 10 years. If that's possible today, there's like what's possible then for music, what's possible for architecture, product design. Like, are we just going to be writing text and having furniture made for us? Like that's crazy, right? But it may actually be possible. So yeah, that's in a nutshell what the series is about. It has creative lessons. So what I've already given you is the first lesson on mixing and texturing. There's another lesson on composition, right? Where if AI is doing all the work, like it can do all the details and generate something for you from scratch, you can just sit back, right? You could just sit back and be like, I want to focus on the big picture. I want to focus on composition. How are these things related? That's important. And the series also, it talks about how you can make money through multimodal AI. And also it sort of talks about the industrial shifts we'll see, particularly for Hollywood, if AI can just synthesize everything. And also, it dips into some philosophical stuff as well. So what is the nature of creativity? Why do we create? Do we need to create? All the like all these kinds of things, all these kinds of questions. I think they will be re-examined over the next 2 to 10 years. Like what is the definition of a creative? What is their role? Those kinds of things.
I see. You gave some really interesting and provocative examples. It made me excited. So my next question is, what's your vision for the channel?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this series is so exhausting. It's 19 videos. I spent maybe 4 or 5 months on it full time, right? So I haven't had much time to even think about what's next. However, I have been sort of looking longingly at. So I have another series going on called GPT-3 and Identity. So the whole thing started when I, gave GPT-3 some examples of my tweets, like 26 examples. And then again, I hit submit and it started generating these tweets that really sound like stuff I would say, right? Like it pretty accurately captured the essence of my identity and character. And so I made a video on it called I Have a Confession, which is it's like this whole identity crisis, right? Like if all it takes is 26 tweets for GPT-3. And by the way, I even posted these tweets on my own Twitter and nobody noticed. Like my best friends follow me on Twitter. They didn't notice that an AI had basically replaced me. Right. And so That series asks really, really philosophical, identity related questions. The second video in that series is called Introducing GPT-3 Naval. So it's sort of a part two to the first video where basically, so GPT-3 had sort of pretty easily replaced me on Twitter. In the meantime, somebody else had started a Twitter account called GPT-3 Naval, which is, so if you, are you familiar with Naval Ravikant? Do you know him or no?
I don't.
So Naval Ravikant is this really famous Silicon Valley angel investor. He's got a whole folklore around him. He's like almost like a modern day philosopher even. And to be honest, quote unquote, all these tech bros just love Naval, right? And I mean, he's a pretty smart guy. Like he's no idiot, right? And so, anyways, somebody else made while I was going out dealing with this stuff, somebody else made like a GPT-3 Naval Twitter account, and so I found that GPT-3 was not only replacing me, but also my heroes, right? Like
Oh.
Naval. And then I not only had an identity crisis, but also a hero identity crisis. Is what if everything is AI? If I can be replaced by AI, if people I look up to can be replaced by AI, how is it AI in a way has already replaced? Like Naval is one of like the most followed Twitter accounts like in the world, right? Like it's crazy. And if it has already usurped Naval, like what does that mean for me and where I'm going? And so that video is also a lot of fun. I love working on it. And so I think if there's one thing I've been looking at longingly is the next part in that series. It's essentially on AI and identity. And the next video, I've already mentioned this on my Substack newsletter and somewhere I think in my podcast. The next video is going to be on GPT-3 and celebrity culture. And so what are the implications of to identity? And I'm gonna stop talking before I spoil the next video. So, and I don't know when, like it may be December, it may be next year. That series is not like this one. This one was very intense. I'm gonna work on, I'm gonna release all of it. That series I sort of do in between when, I feel like the story is mentally formulated in my head. And so that's going to be probably what I'm going to work on next. But I also wouldn't mind in the meantime, just like I have these classic videos where I just research what GPT-3 can do, right? Like the tokenization video, another video on generating engrams. My most recent one was writing press releases with GPT-3. I encourage, if you're not that technical, but you want to get a good intro in a way to GPT-3, watch my video on generating press releases. So in the meantime, I wouldn't mind making a few videos like that. I just don't know when. I need a break.
Maybe GPT-3 can give you a break and do all of your work.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point.
I see. So,
Apart from excitement, it's a furious thing. Like, what if everything is replaced?
Yeah, yeah. So that series, like, so the point of that series, and this is something that I'm still like working on, but it's almost like so me, I work in tech. We're all in tech. It's very easy for me to accept this idea that I might be data, right? That I might be data, my memories, everything I hold dear, everything that I thought was real was just data. And GPT-3 is trained on data, right? And it can mimic that data, right? And so I think that the point of this series is how will we all come to terms with the fact that we're data, right? How do we, and like, and is there such thing as a soul? Is there something as spirit? Like, you know what I mean? Like if everything is a sensory experience and it's data, how do we come to terms with that? And it sounds crazy. Like the series, if you watch it, like it's so silly, but also interesting. But it's meant so that once you watch that series, when you're taking a shower or going for a drive, that's when it kicks in. That, oh wait, what does that mean for me? What does that mean? If AI can mimic me, do my job, if it can replace my heroes, like if it can, like, what's my role? What's my, and so the series has like a long-term goal. Like I do want to provide some kind of catharsis to people in the future. Like how do you cope with these emotions, these philosophical questions? Are there any answers at all? And I want to go deeper. Like I want to meet with both therapists as well as, philosophers and ask them, what do you guys think? Because it is an important question. And one of the things nobody talks about, even in the GPT-3 community, this kind of existential crisis is almost a rite of passage, right? In the first few months you use GPT-3, you're like, this is really mind-blowing. What does it mean for me? What does it mean for my existence? And so it is also important. And that's also why I love that series too. And it's fun to make. I enjoy making that series.
I see. And like the questions you raise are so like interesting, and which makes us think, okay, what are the things we like take for granted? So that's very nice. Do you have like a utopian or a dystopian vision?
Yeah. So, like going back to like one of your earlier questions is, what is the channel? I am. I think part of the reason I make the channel is I believe in building a utopia. I think it's really important. I think I'm an idealist, and I am a futurist as well. And I just watched a great movie. It's called Things to Come. It's in 1936. It's a really old movie, right? Like that's when it was made, but it's on this idea of why do we settle? Why do we rest? Why don't we keep going? Right? To me, like we should solve all disease. Like if it were up to me, I live in Canada. We're having a housing crisis. I don't understand why haven't we printed 10 million houses? Like it blows my mind. Right? We have enough. We have the resources. Right? We just can't get our act together. And I also think we need to demand things. Right? Like you need to tell your government print these houses, and they'll tell all these reasons why it is not possible. It'll mess up the economy, blah blah. But if you ask, it might happen. If you never ask, if you don't demand it, it will never happen, right? And so part of the reason I made GPTX DALI in our multimodal future, I wanted to crystallize what could be possible in the next 2 to 10 years. And I found that if I can crystallize it, if I can make it feel real and tangible, almost like you can taste it, perhaps people who work at companies like Adobe, Google, OpenAI, Amazon, who are maybe in position to make these things a reality, may actually consider it, right? And I think if the technology gets built like how I describe it in this series, it will change creative life forever, right? Like it will change everything. Imagine anyone can make a blockbuster movie just by writing text. Like that's mind blowing without a budget. You don't need $200 million, right? You can just type in the screenplay and it will generate it, right? You don't need a team technically, right? You can have a team, but you don't need to be like, you can have great chemistry with AI, right? And I think it'll empower a lot of people. I think a lot of people have great stories to tell. A lot of people don't have the skills. They might not have the discipline to learn Photoshop, but it doesn't make what they could contribute any less valuable, right? One of my more radical takes, I've mentioned this before, is I want OpenAI to give GPT-3 access to refugees, right? I think it's a radical take, but I think imagine this thing can communicate in any language. It can help you write a book. You can publish that book and make money from the book, right? This is economic empowerment, right? And I just think that's really exciting. And so I think so. I guess what also underlines the series and other parts of my work is I also believe in humanity, right? I think you need to give people a chance and you need to tell them this can be done, and then they might actually do it. But if you never tell them they can do anything, they may never achieve anything at all, right? And so like I'm so pro like these other things. Like I'm so on the extreme end. And I've said before, like I'm okay. Like if the government said you're going to be taxed like 70%, but we'll be on the moon, we'll solve cancer, like all the other things, I'm fine with a 70% tax rate. Like I'm so on one end of the spectrum.
I see. Uh, if you have some time, I'll just ask like few light questions to conclude the
Sure.
interview. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Can I ask some radical question, like one radical question?
yeah.
So I have a question, like, what do you think about government making rules for, AI and its regulations? Because they are now in topic and it actually needed to be, like, you're saying it would be a good thing to come out, the whole thing, GT3 and all of that. But what
Yep.
about negative use of it? Because it can replace us. Then it comes to the existential crisis for us. What are we doing? We're eating our own self.
Yeah. So I have talked about in the past, I do have some policy ideas for perhaps regulating GPT-3, large scale language models, multimodal models. I don't think I'll get into those specifics today. I think even at some level of disclosing, right? Like I have access to a model which is as big as GPT-3, or we are a company that has it. I think at minimum, that's not so crazy to tell the government, just so you know, voluntarily. Like you don't have to do it either, right? But I brought it up in the community and I got like really barbecued. And so but I think the thing is it's still emerging, right? All of this stuff is we are just scratching the surface. It's so new. Like we all don't know what where it will go, what it's capable of, and I don't even think there are people on the other side on the government table who could even set the rules, like set the framework. And so my actual faith is, there is a lot of progress on what's called fine tuning, which is essentially taking these AI models and making them, more appropriate, saying less offensive things. A lot of it is trying to get them to even say that I can't even comment on that, because that's a hard question. And that progress is really promising. And so to me, I might be calling this early, but I think long-term, it might be something which industry actually resolves, because the threat is so serious. But going back to your existential question, I think other than my series, I don't know what you're going to do. Right? Other than watch the GPT-3 and Identity series and like try to like just feel through the emotions of that, I don't know what to tell you.
I see. So coming back to the light question. So if you have like unlimited time and resources, what is one thing you would like to do?
I'd love to build the ideas in this series. Like, I'd love to make the ultimate multimodal creative tool. Like, you can take a song and generate a painting. You can, create some crazy product based on a movie you liked. And, I'd love to give blockbuster capabilities to ordinary people. Like, I watched the movie Tenet. It cost $210 million to make. I would love to give that capability to like some 8-year-old who lives, maybe in a slum, and say, you can make better than Tenet, right? I think that's something that I'd love to make, and just like unlimited research. That's what I would be doing for sure.
It's like giving superpower to everyone.
Yes. Yeah. And it's unlocking human potential. Like, one of the videos, like I had GPT-3 write a whole poem, right? And the theme of that poem in the series is it ends with something like, the beauty was always in his heart and not in his hands, right? I think there's something there about, you can be great. You have in you great stories. You have in you great ideas. I think everyone is creative. I think everyone has creative potential. Anyone can make, the Ninth Symphony or something great. But I think a lot of it is a lot of it is systematic disadvantages. A lot of it is access to tools. And I also think too, a lot of it is our tools not being futuristic, right? If we built these kinds of tools, like I talk about in this series, suddenly we'll have a lot more creative people who are achieving great things that we could have never dreamed of. And so this is an area where I actually think technology is lacking. One of my more controversial takes is Photoshop is behind the times. Illustrator is behind the times. 3ds Max, Fruity Loops. These are like, to be honest, in the tech world, they're almost like 50 years old. Like, they're ancient at this point. We need newer tools. We need newer tools that actually suit our creative desires, that are modern day, right? Like we want more things now. We want to do more, and we want everyone to have access to it. And it should be a lot more usable. Like, I still don't understand. If I want to become a designer, I still don't understand why I have to learn Adobe Illustrator, right? Like, I don't understand that. I want to be a designer. I want to make furniture. Why do I have to learn this software program, right? AI will be a lot easier. Like, I want this chair, change this angle, change that. I don't like the base of the chair. I don't like the color. Show me a different fabric. Now you have a chair. No Illustrator. There's no layers involved. There's no selection tool. You don't have to learn like any of that stuff, right? And so, yeah, I'm excited for creative tools that actually match human potential, in modern day human potential. That's why I made the series.
Got it. And are there any like conferences or events you recommend to people who are interested in creative AI?
Yeah. So thank you for asking that. So the series ended today. Today was the last video, and I mentioned in today's video that I'm throwing a Clubhouse event next Friday. And so this is a free event. You just need to download the app, and it's like a Zoom call, but it's audio only. Like, there's no video. And my goal is everyone who watched the series, you can join me and we can chat about it. All the ideas in the series, what you thought, people's different creative experiences, and even just what's interesting about this series is it's been one video every day, 19 videos. What's interesting, it's almost like the same people have been watching each video. So it's also going to be a fun audience experience as well. So I encourage all of you, please watch GPTX DALI and our multimodal future. It's on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/BAKZT future. It's a playlist. So you go to my YouTube page, click playlist, click the series, watch the series, and join me next Friday. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Awesome. And my last question is like, what's on your travel bucket list?
That's a good question. I think, deep down inside, I think there are certain places in the world which are, very creatively inspiring. So, and just good for creativity. They're, definitely Italy, they have a whole history with Da Vinci and that stuff, Renaissance. Japan, I'm very inspired by Japanese work, Japanese aesthetic. And also, I do also want to check out Germany as well. I think there's something about German productivity, architecture, history, that I also find very compelling. And I'd love to live in all these places too. Like not just visit. I'd love to be there for 4 months, 6 months, really soak in the culture, creative life over there, the people, the locals. And also one last place, if we have just another minute, it's definitely Los Angeles. Like I think there's something about LA where all the writers and movie directors are. I'd love to just be around those people as well. So that's my travel bucket list.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Bax. It was an amazing interview. Like there were like a lot of moments for me where you like showed and like talk about example which was quite provocative, and definitely I'll complete the rest of the series and join you.
Thank you so much. This was awesome.
Yeah. Have a nice rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.